This show is being sponsored by the National Cooperative Bank, NCB. NCB is dedicated to strengthening communities nationwide through the delivery of banking and financial services for the nation's cooperatives, their members, and other socially responsible organizations. More information on the power of community ownership in action can be found at ncb.coop. That's ncb.coop. And now stay tuned for your host, Vernon Oakes.
Good morning, everyone. This is Vernon Oakes. Welcome this Thursday morning to Everything Cooperative. We're talking to you about the benefits of co-ops to the community, to our nation, and to the world. John Zippert is supposed to be with us this morning. He's from the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. He is calling in to talk to us about the Federation, how it got started, and some of the things that they're doing in the southern states. Good morning, John.
Yes, good morning.
Hey, how are you doing this morning?
Pretty good.
Fantastic. Glad you're on this morning. Know you have a meeting to go to, and so we're so thankful that you took the time to come and talk to us about the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. Tell me, how did you get started in co-ops?
Well, it's a long story. I volunteered for the summer of 1965 with the Congress of Racial Equality to register people to vote in Louisiana. I grew up in New York City. I went for the summer of 65 to help register people to vote. They sent me to a place called St. Landry Parish, Louisiana. Opelousas is the parish seat. And when I got there, most of the people who would work with me were small farmers and sharecroppers, people who had some degree of independence coming from owning land. And while we worked on the issues of voting and public accommodations, most of the farmers were concerned because they weren't getting a fair price for their sweet potato production. And we talked about forming some kind of organization or association where the farmers could market their own sweet potatoes. And really, I had gone to college in New York and everything, but I never had any formal training in cooperatives in any of the economics courses I took or any of that. So as we went forward with this, and we would meet every week and talk about what kind of organization the farmers wanted to sell their own sweet potatoes, I found out that there was such a thing as a cooperative, and that many farmers in the Midwest and other parts of the country were using cooperatives as a way, a democratic way, an equitable way to sell their products and divide the benefits. And so this was before the internet and all of that. We sent for information from the Farmers Cooperative Service and USDA and other, what was then called CLUSA, that's now called the National Co-op Business Association. And we sent for information, and we studied the information and ultimately organized the Grand Marie Vegetable Marketing Co-op, which sold sweet potatoes, okra, and hot cayenne peppers from South Louisiana. And
John, but can you hold a second? Listen, I'm all the way back to 1965. That's the year I graduated from high school. How does a city boy from New York get down south dealing with sweet potatoes?
I went for the summer of 1965, and it's been a long summer. Never went back. At the end of that summer, I went to an evaluation session and talked about the work I had done, and the people from the Congress of Racial Equality in Louisiana, the leadership people, asked me, was was I willing to go back and continue working. And I think one of the things that people said to me, well, the civil rights movement is fine, but people come and they go and they don't stay long enough to really do anything. So I said, well, I'll go back for 6 months. I'll go back to New York, at the end of the year. But as I said, it's been a long summer. I basically stayed on and continued to work with cooperatives. And some of the cooperatives I helped to organize in Louisiana were among the groups that started the Federation of Southern Cooperatives in 1967. And then in 1970, after a long struggle with a local organization in Alabama called the Panola Land Buying Association, the Federation helped this group to acquire 1,100 acres of land, and the Federation agreed to help pay for the land, and in exchange, we kind of made an agreement about a portion of the land to be used to build a training center in Epps, Alabama, which is in Sumter County, Alabama. And so by that time I had gotten married in Louisiana, which is another long story. And I moved my young family, and a number of us moved our families from different parts of the South to the training center land in Sumter County, and actually physically built some of the first buildings of the training center in 71. And I lived on the Federation's property for 5 years, from 71 to 76. And then I moved to the adjoining county, which is Greene County, Alabama. And I've been there ever since. I should say that Sumter and Greene counties and some of the other rural counties in West Alabama provided the people who marched across the bridge on Bloody Sunday in Selma. And so we're sort of in the cradle of the civil rights movement, the voting rights movement. And in some ways, the Federation's cooperative movement grew out of and is in some ways a part of the continuation of the civil rights movement. And we continue to embrace concerns of social, political, and economic justice in what we're trying to do.
Okay. You do have a good story. 50 years almost you've been there, left New York. So I take it you went to college and studied, you said economics at least.
Well, I actually studied history and the philosophy of science. Wow. I was going to open a philosophy of science store. But, no, I think I got a great education at the expense of the taxpayers of New York State and New York City. And they taught me how to learn, how to think, and how to learn other things, which is probably what education
should do.
ought to be about. And I brought it with me to the rural South and put it to work over the last 50 years. And I am hoping to write a book soon. I'm actually planning, not at the end of this year, but at the end of next year, to pretty much stop working full time with the Federation. I may work part time and on some specific assignments. I'd really like to write a book about my experiences and the whole development of the Federation, because I think it's an important story, and it hasn't. Pieces and parts of it have been written up, but I'd really like to write it up. And it also somewhat is a personal memoir of kind of the struggles and efforts that I've been a part of over the last 50 years.
I would like to read that book and get that history of the Federation. Ralph Page.
Well, when I get it together, I'm going to come back on your program and talk about it.
Okay. You know, Ralph Page, the executive director of the Federation, has been on the program, and so has Cornelius Blanding. And so we've got a sense of it. As a matter of fact, one of them told me that a co-op was formed when they were doing the voter registration. The white establishments would not sell the black farmers that were trying to get the vote. They wouldn't sell them gasoline. So they had to form their own cooperative to go buy gasoline. They just pooled money and either rented or bought a truck and went across the state line and bought gas so that they could farm.
Exactly, and that was in it was called Mid-South Oil Co-op. It was in West Tennessee, outside of about 20, 30 miles from Memphis, and that was a place where there had been a tent city. You know, and throughout the South, there were people who were working on plantations who were dispossessed when they tried to register to vote. And some of the people in Tennessee were in that category. Others were people who were farmers and owned land. And so that is the history. And in the case of the Panola land buyers, this is a group of people in Sumter County, Alabama, who, in addition to registering to vote, they also sued the plantation owners for they were tenant farmers farming cotton, and they sued the plantation owners for the part of the government price support payment that they were entitled to, and they won the lawsuit. But then the three major plantations that they were working on evicted everyone at the end of 1966. And it was a victory in some ways. It led to over 100 families were dispossessed. Some left and went to Chicago, Tuskegee, other places. But about 40 families remained and organized something called the Panola Land Buying Association. And Panola was the community in North Sumter County where these plantations were. And the Federation by then was organizing and had some organizers in Alabama who met with the group. And one of them, who's now deceased, Lewis Black of Greensboro, Alabama, Mr. Black found a white merchant in Sumter County who had just lost 3 tracts of land totaling 1,100 acres. And he went into an agreement with
John.
Yes.
Can you hold that thought? We're gonna come back. We have to take a quick break right now. But if anybody have any comments or questions, they can call in at 1-800-450-7876. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is Vernon Oakes talking to you about the benefits of cooperatives. This program is brought to you by the National Cooperative Bank, NCB. You know, NCB provides comprehensive banking services to cooperatives and other member-owned organizations throughout the country. What makes NCB unique is that the bank was created to address the financial needs of an underserved market niche, people who join together cooperatively to meet personal, social, or business needs. especially in low-income communities. And we have John Zippert on the phone with us this morning. John is in Alabama. He left New York and went there in 1965, almost 50 years ago. John, I looked up Epps, Alabama, and it said that in 2010 there were, Sumter, Alabama, the county, there was 13,763 people residing in the county. 75% are Black or African American. And the median income was $18,911, where 38% of the population was below the poverty line. 47% under the poverty line were under 18, and 36% over 65. So it's called the Black Belt region of Central Alabama, and it's relatively poor. And it seems like that's some of the places that the NCB would want to be in, local income communities. Have you done any banking with NCB?
Yes, the Federation has, and several of our cooperatives and the Federation itself have borrowed from NCB. The Freedom Quilting Bee of Wilcox County, Alabama, was one of the first borrowers, and the Federation itself, NCB was part of a 3-bank group that loaned us $1 million about 10 years ago that we're still, I think we've paid about half of it back at this point. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, and actually in addition to organizing cooperatives and doing cooperative training and education, the Federation is an advocacy organization on behalf of African American and other small family farmers and other rural people. And we actually participated in the efforts to create the NCB, when it was first set up. And so we're very familiar with it, and we have been borrowers. I think, and I'm hoping that they pay even more attention to places like the Black Belt counties of Alabama as they go forward. And I think one of the problems was that they somewhat changed focus from the original focus after Reagan became the president. And I don't know if you know all that history.
No, I don't.
There, it was actually a quasi-federal bank at the beginning. And I think because they feared the conservative politics of Reagan, they took the bank independent. And I think that may have been a wise decision in regard to the times and the situation, but it also somewhat limited the long-term access to federal money to do compensatory loans to low-income people. Hold on one second.
While you're doing, NCB has a very interesting, as a bank, they have to, as any business does, they have to make good loans and they may have to make money. And with a goal of helping low-income communities, they also have to make sure that when they make these loans that people can pay it back, like you were doing with the loans that you were talking about. So it makes it a very interesting piece, and I've wanted to get into the bank more to find out how they do this, because it's in some ways it's a conflicting kind of goals. You've got to make money to survive, and then you've got to loan money to people that don't necessarily have. Well, in most cases, they don't have what other banks are looking for. What other banks are looking for are people with collateral, with experience, with education. And more often than not, we've had people on the program that started out, they're blue-collar workers. They don't have the education. They don't have the collateral, but they still need the money and they need the funds. And in most of these cases, the businesses survive and they strive because they get the education that they need, which is one of the things that you guys do in Epps, Alabama, and which is the fifth principle of the modern cooperative is education, training, and information. And that's my favorite of the seven. So you find that in a cooperative, you've already talked about democratic member control. Normally is one member, one vote, voluntary and open membership, so people can come in no matter what your education, what kind of background, race, gender, it doesn't make any difference. Members have to put in some money. There's economic participation, and they have to be autonomous and independent, which means that they really have to have the education so they can make informed decisions. The sixth and the seventh are the most recent two that were added. These principles were first founded in 1844 in England. And the sixth one is cooperation among cooperatives, where the cooperatives sort of work together to help each other, and concern for the community. And again, most co-ops that I have heard about, John, they're formed when there's some economic or some kind of community problem. The co-op is formed to solve the community problem. And another person on a program called Papa Sen said if there's no community problem, there's no need for a co-op. There's no need for the business. So they're formed to solve some community problem. And they normally provide a product or service that is as good as a for-profit company and sometimes better. And they are competitively priced as some of the grocery stores are, but then some of the products, they're less expensive, like in housing co-ops over the long run, they're much less because they don't have the need for a profit. And then most people, the members, because they're members and owners, they take better care of the business. And this housing co-ops is what I have found because I'm a property manager and I've done a lot of work with housing co-ops.
Well, I agree with all of that. I think, though, if you're going to look at really poor people organizing together, that there needs to be some thought, that there needs to be some form of equity or other kind of support if 10 poor people in a community get together and say we are going to market our service as a lawn care landscaping company, or a group of people get together and say we are going to be a home repair and construction company or whatever, and we're going to use the skills we have. Often these people are people who are of extreme low income, have very limited resources, and so they really are not bankable even by a national cooperative bank. There needs to be some kind of support. Maybe it needs to be a matching support tied to what people can put up themselves and do through grassroots fundraising, or maybe it needs to be based on the number of jobs or income they produce. I mean, I'm living in Alabama when Mercedes-Benz decided to come to Alabama. The state of Alabama basically provided a subsidy of almost $150,000 a job to them to get them started. Now, since they've been here and in their coming, they invested millions and all the rest. But without that initial help from the government, they would not have come and they would not have developed. So I think, looking at community economic development, and particularly for poor communities, there needs to be some kind of different approach than what we've had in the past. And so I was troubled, and this was long ago, when the Co-op Bank, for political reasons, really severed its direct connections to the federal government, which might have led to some continuing congressional support for what I call compensatory type of lending to get people off the ground and started. But the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, we're doing what we can with what we have. And, I at the beginning, I talked about things that happened 50 years ago, but we have been working, for instance, with fishermen along the Gulf Coast in South Alabama, South Mississippi, and Plaquemine Parish, Louisiana, on trying to organize fishermen, shrimpers, crabbers into and oystermen into a cooperative to market their products. So we've been working in the last few years with people who are raising goats, small farmers who are raising goats, to come together in a cooperative where we can look at some kind of a slaughtering facility for goats. And, eating goat meat is popular among various ethnic groups in this country. So we in the Federation, we are looking every day at these possibilities for, I guess, the base of our membership are small black farmers. So we look at agricultural and rural things, but we have begun talking to people also about organizing together to develop their own jobs in the service sector of the economy and coming together to do some of that. But again,
John, let's come back and talk after a quick break. Let's come back and talk about the different kinds of co-ops. You've listed some of them. We talked about the financing. And again, if anybody would like to call in, you can call in at 1-800-450-7876 for any questions of John or myself or comments. We'll be right back.
News Talk 1450 WOL and WOLDCnews.com.
Welcome back. This is Vernon Oaks talking to you about everything cooperatives, the benefits of co-ops with John Zippert from Alabama and the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. When we took break, we were talking about the different kinds of businesses that John was telling us that he's working with. But I'd like to go into the definition of a co-op so you'll know what we're talking about. And a co-op is any business. Any business you can think of can be a co-op. It's just a form of ownership. And it's owned either by the employees. So if an employees own the business, then it's called a worker co-op. And if the people that use the products or services own the business, then it's called a consumer co-op. Those are the basic two forms of co-ops. There are also sometimes farmers get together and form a co-op just to buy things together. That's called a purchasing co-op. And when they buy it in volume, they can get, more often than not, better seeds, better fertilizers for a cheaper price. So there are people getting together, coming together, working cooperatively in a democratic way, making decisions themselves about their outcome, what happens in their world. So it can be any business. And right before we took the break, John was talking about different kinds of business that the Federation is working with. John, can you go back and talk more about those businesses, lay them out again? You talked about goat farming, financing. Go ahead.
Okay, I hear you again. I'm sorry.
Okay. So can you tell us about the different kinds of businesses that you were talking about before we took break?
Well, most of about half of our membership are small African American farmers holding on to land in the South, and most of these farmers have 100 acres or less. So most of the cooperatives we have set up have been agricultural producer and marketing co-ops where people sell their products, watermelons, okra, Crowder peas, squash, cabbage, sweet potatoes, things of that kind. And they sell them together some of them have formed together and set up farmers markets. Others have done it through stores. Others, we have some people in Alabama who are selling now to Walmart and Whole Foods, more commercial outlets like that. Now, these farmers, when they can, also, as you said, buy their fertilizer, seeds, and other farm supplies together. Another big part of our membership are part of, and we haven't mentioned this at all, community development credit unions. And credit unions are, of course, a form of financial cooperative. And we have over 10,000 people organized in rural communities in credit unions where they save and borrow their money collectively. And again, they pay. This is again a case where people have organized this in relation to a problem of payday loans, of usurious interest rates, of people exploiting them in various ways to borrow small amounts of money. So we have agricultural co-ops, credit unions. We have some housing cooperatives. I mentioned more recent development since Katrina on the Gulf Coast. We have been working with fishermen coming together to market their catch, and it's primarily, it's not sort of deep sea fishing. It's more shrimp and oysters and crabs and things of that kind. So there are a variety of cooperatives. We have some groups that are trying to form larger types of consumer stores and cooperatives of that nature now in some of the urban centers, which, a food cooperative in a community is a way to combat this whole issue of food deserts, places in urban communities where people can't get fresh foods and vegetables and can't get, they're basically dealing with these small 7-Eleven stores rather than some kind of a supermarket type store where they can even get just basic items at a better price. But we work with buying clubs that buy a case of eggs, 30 dozen eggs, and split them up between the members. We've worked with all kinds of things that basically help people to stretch their budget and live a better economic life. And I think that's how I got involved in cooperatives, and that's what cooperatives are about. It is a process. It's some people, they ask me, well, give me, I want instant co-op, like I want instant coffee. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't work that way. It is a human development process. It is a people-centered process, and it involves organizing, education, saving, and pooling resources, and then taking collective action together and really, as you said, sort of operating with those principles and continuing as an owner of your own business to learn what's involved and continue the education. So that's really where the constant education, continuing education part of it comes from.
And I call it just-in-time education. You're giving people the information they need to make informed decisions as they need it. And so I find teaching adults information that they need in order to run their business, they're eager to get it. They're happy to get the information and the knowledge, and the teaching becomes a lot easier. I've taught for 12 years in my career, John, and so but only 1 year in junior high, the rest in college, and you find out sometimes college students don't even know where they're going or what they're about, but the adults do, and they really, really want the education. I do want to go back to something else you said. You said people help. And another definition of co-ops that I got from Chuck Snyder, who's the president of NCB, when he was on the program, he said that co-ops are nothing but people helping people. And what do you think about that definition?
Well, I think too, and really people helping themselves to help each other. There is that whole idea of connectivity and interrelationship and interdependence that is a part of cooperatives. The cooperatives will not work if people don't understand and internalize those principles you mentioned and then act on them. And in practical terms, I mean, I've done numerous training sessions with people that on their financial statement. It is a business, so you get a financial statement, and I think most people are afraid of financial statements and complicated economic things. And what the cooperative movement says to people, that you are an owner of this business, you need to understand it. You need to understand what your assets are, what your liabilities are, what your net worth is all about. You need to understand when you make a decision in the cooperative about pricing items or setting the occupancy charge on a unit in cooperative housing or whatever, you need to understand all of the expenses that you're going to have to pay with that money and what is going to be left. And if you want in the housing, if you want to have a limited equity or whatever, none of this comes out of the air. I think when people really understand the basic economics of what they're into in the cooperative, then they can make better collective decisions. So if they make a decision about, we're only going to accept this grade of vegetables or these 2 or 3 grades and not, the lowest grade. Well, what does that mean to the farmer whose half of his production to start with is in the lowest grade. Don't we have to find some place or some way to deal with that production? And that kind of a understanding and analysis, for instance, has led to some cooperatives getting into value-added production where they cut greens or they cut potatoes or they cut and bag other products,
John,
and they sell them to school systems.
Hey, John, we're going to have to take another break, and this is the last segment coming up, so I told you this hour goes by real quick. We're talking about education and training, and I find that adults, they grab those numbers a lot quicker. They want to learn it. They want to know it. They know it impacts them, so the knowledge becomes real to them. Having taught 5 years in the business school at Howard and teaching young folks, it's so much harder for them to grasp the ideas. So, but we'll be right back to win our last segment. So hold on, we'll be right back.
News updates on the web at WOLDCnews.com.
We're back. We're back with WOL, whose motto is information is power. And information is power. If you get the information and put it to use, put energy behind it, action behind the information, you have power. So we totally agree with WOL, and we enjoy working with them and bringing this program to give you information about co-ops, that if you take the information that we give you here and put some action to it, you can have power in your life and have say-so in your future. John, before we get too far, if somebody wanted to know about the Federation, how would they get in touch with you all?
Okay. Well, we have a website, and I think that is the best way. And the website is www.federation.coop, C-O-O-P. We are, there's some people are familiar with .com and .org, but there's also .coop, which is a URL reserved for real cooperatives, and we're a part of that. So www.federation.coop, and on there they will find we have the training center in Epps where I am, but we have offices, our fiscal and accounting offices in Atlanta, Georgia, where Ralph Page and Cornelius Blanding are. We have an office in Albany, Georgia, in Jackson, Mississippi, and we have smaller offices in Louisiana, South Carolina, and Florida that are located at local co-ops that are also part of the Federation. So I think that would be the best place to reach us. If somebody wants to contact me directly in Epps, it's P.O. Box 95, Epps, EPES, Alabama 35460, and that will get to us. And I could give my email.
Would you please?
Zippert, JZIPPERT @AOL.com. And so that would be a way to reach us. And I think if they Google me, a lot of stuff comes up. If they Google Federation of Southern Cooperatives, it will take them to that information too. So if they didn't get to write everything down, they can find us.
Okay, so in this last section, I would like to talk to you about education. I like teaching. I like seeing people learn. And so I see you have a rural training and research center in Epps, EPES, Alabama, where you do training. I'm looking at your website that you told everybody about it. I went to the federation.coop.
Okay.
And I see you train
Right.
credit unions, housing, environmental justice, African American boys, men and boys collaborative, and cooperative center. So do you do the training? Do you give out certificates, or can you get a degree?
We do. Yes, we and some at various times in the last 50 years we've had more and less in-depth type of co-op training depending on what the support has been. Most of the courses now are short 2 or 3 day courses over weekends and so on. Although we have done, in the past, we've done 2 and 3 weeks. We have a dormitory facility at EPS, so we can house comfortably about 40 people, but we actually have 2 bunk beds in each room, so uncomfortably we can house 80 people, and there are motels and hotels within one. Some are within 15 miles and others are within 25 miles. So some people, we have had conferences with 100, 200 people. We just had our 47th annual meeting. We had over 300 people. Well, some people, not everybody can stay in the dormitory. Some stay in local hotels. And we have a commercial kitchen cafeteria so we can prepare meals for people when they're there. So we generally have done 2 and 3 day types of trainings in the last 5 years or so, because we found that was more convenient for working people to be able to come. We do give people a certificate. We have explored in the past, and we haven't had great success with the post-secondary educational establishment of Alabama. They really don't understand that cooperative economics and cooperative education, is a whole separate area. We also do, some training. I mean, we do training with boards of directors of cooperatives and credit unions, where we generally go to their location and do a session with them, in their home community, a couple of nights and maybe a Saturday, that kind of thing. We do, we really do, and you said this, that what we're dealing with here is adult education, non-formal education. So, we do it in whatever format, whatever people want and need. We base it on that, and we try to provide it. So that's what our educational program really is about.
Well, I've had the desire to see if we could get some formal education in cooperatives, like either a AA degree or a 4-year Bachelor's of Science degree in the cooperative business education. I know when I got I've said this several times on the program, when I got my MBA from Stanford, I never heard the word cooperative.
Exactly.
I only heard it when I started working in this. But I was surprised to find out. Let me just finish this real quick. I was surprised to find out that Leland Stanford, who started Stanford University, was a senator, and he had found co-ops, and he put together laws to go to the Senate to create worker co-ops. And I don't know what caused him to get the transformation, because he was a railroad baron, so he was a capitalist. But somewhere he found about worker co-ops, and he was pushing them forward. But at Stanford, they don't have any classes that I know of. At least in the business schools, they did not. Go ahead, John. You were going to say something?
Well, we are working with Tuskegee University in Alabama on having cooperatives as a formal part of their agribusiness training. And we've had some meetings with them, and we're working with them on a curriculum, and they intend to make that available to other historically black colleges and universities, and I guess whoever wants to take advantage of it. So we are, when we can, exploring that whole area. And I agree with you, the educational system in this country, starting from kindergarten on up, does not really ever mention cooperatives or talk about cooperatives as another way of doing business, does not talk about those principles, which, if they did, I think would be exciting to people. And some of the educational process that the Federation has been through, in addition to learning new things, we have to unlearn some things that we learned in the general educational structure, which is sort of very supportive, I think, of the capitalist system in a lot of ways, and doesn't really talk to people about its problems and deficiencies and the possibilities of alternatives like cooperatives. So, I do think this whole area of cooperative education is one we need to work on. And, I was pleased to be with you this morning because, some ways of reaching people are non-traditional, like radio, internet, television, whatever, and we need to use all of them.
Well, John, I just got to notice that we only have about a minute and a half left to go, and I would like to spend an hour talking to you about this education piece. I wanted to find out some of the things we need to get people to unlearn. But, and going back in history, Marcus Garvey talked about co-ops. It goes all the way back. So that W.B. Du Bois, so it's in the Black American history. I wasn't taught it in anywhere. So I'm learning a lot and like learning and like to pass this on to other generations, because working cooperatively seems to be a West African and a Native American, Alaskan way that they just worked in community. We have a minute left. Do you have any other comments you want to make to the audience?
Well, just that go and visit our website. We need financial supporters. We need people who have business skills who might want to volunteer and spend a week with our co-ops. We have just people who might want to come and build a building. We have all of those possible types of opportunities for people to participate and share with us and learn with us. And I really,
John, we got to go.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll be in touch again.
Thanks a lot, buddy.
Okay.
Bye now.
News updates on the web at WOLDCnews.com.